There's a story almost everyone has heard about the Great Pyramid of Giza, tens of thousands of slaves whipped into hauling stone under the desert sun. It's in movies, textbooks, casual conversation. It turns out that story didn't come from anyone who watched it happen. It came from a Greek tourist writing it down 2,000 years after the fact. And in 2023, 4,500 years after the last stone was set, researchers found a corridor inside this pyramid that no human eye had ever seen. The most studied building on Earth is still handing us surprises. Start with the raw numbers, because they set up everything else. Roughly 2.3 million blocks of stone, averaging 2.5 tons each, some over 80 tons, heavier than a loaded truck, and yet the gaps between many of these blocks are so precise that you cannot fit a sheet of paper between them. No cranes existed. Wheeled carts were barely in use. Getting this many multi-ton blocks stacked with this level of precision would be a genuine engineering challenge with modern equipment, let alone 4,500 years ago, using nothing but ropes, sledges, and human muscle. So where did the slave story come from? Around 450 BCE, the Greek historian Herodotus traveled through Egypt and wrote down what locals told him: 100,000 men whipped into forced labor. The problem is timing. Herodotus visited more than 2,000 years after the pyramid was built. He wasn't reporting an eyewitness account. He was recording folklore that had already drifted for 2 millennia. He even gave suspiciously precise numbers: 10 years just to build the access road, 20 more to raise the pyramid itself. Specific, dramatic, and unsupported by a single Egyptian record from the time. And yet this secondhand travelogue became the version of events repeated for over 2,000 years, echoed in classical texts, then later in paintings, novels, and eventually every Hollywood pyramid scene. Later historians have suggested something simpler. Faced with a structure this incomprehensible, Herodotus reached for the most dramatic rumor available in the marketplace and wrote it down as fact, because nothing else could explain what he was looking at. The real story surfaced somewhere nobody was looking for it. In 1990, a tourist riding a horse near the Giza Plateau stumbled, literally, over a low wall buried in the sand. That wall wasn't debris, it was part of a tomb. Egyptian archaeologists expanded the excavation from that single point, and what emerged was staggering: an entire settlement and hundreds of burial sites belonging to the people who built the pyramids, sitting quietly under the sand the whole time, a short walk from one of the most visited monuments on the planet. A truth buried for thousands of years, uncovered because a horse tripped at exactly the right spot. That accident actually confirmed something archaeologist Mark Lehner had already been digging into since 1988. Southeast of the pyramids, his team had been uncovering an entire town: housing, administrative buildings, bakeries large enough to produce thousands of loaves a day, and breweries producing beer at serious scale. This wasn't a prison camp, it was infrastructure built to sustain a workforce for years at a stretch. Radiocarbon dating placed this settlement exactly within the reign of Khufu and his successors, the same window the pyramid was actually built in, not some later unrelated era. Excavation director Zahi Hawass drew the obvious conclusion: these were not slaves. They were paid laborers, organized into named crews. Each crew further split into smaller gangs with their own identities and rivalries, not unlike work teams on a modern construction site. One crew's name, translated, means Friends of Khufu. Nobody names an enslaved workforce after their king as a badge of pride. That's a name a proud, willing crew gives itself. These were farmers conscripted on a rotation from across Egypt, serving roughly 3-month shifts before heading home to their fields, likely timed around the Nile's flood season when farming itself was on pause anyway. Hawass estimated the real workforce at around 10,000 people at any given time, a tenth of what Herodotus claimed, spread across the full length of construction. Excavations even revealed what these workers ate. Records point to roughly 21 cattle and 23 sheep supplied daily from farms across the region, enough meat to suggest a workforce that was well fed and deliberately kept that way. That is not the diet of a starving, whipped labor force. And here's the detail that closes the case: these workers were buried right next to the pyramid, close to the king's own tomb, in tombs built with real care, some even topped with small mud brick domes echoing the pyramid shape above them. In ancient Egypt, proximity to the king in death was one of the highest honors available, reserved for people the state actually valued. Nobody hands that honor to conscripted slaves. In 2013, a French team excavating near the Red Sea at Wadi al-Jarf found something extraordinary: the oldest papyrus ever discovered, the diary of a man named Merer. Merer supervised roughly 200 men moving supplies across Egypt. His logbook records day by day the transport of limestone from the Tura quarry to Giza by boat, including how many trips his crew made, how long each one took, and which officials they reported to along the way. And the dates line up precisely with the final year of Khufu's reign, right when the Great Pyramid was nearing completion. Unlike Herodotus, writing down secondhand rumor 2,000 years later, this was a man on the job writing in real time, with no idea his shift logs would someday become the single best piece of evidence for how the pyramid was actually built. None of this explains the pyramid's precision, though. Its base is aligned to true north with an error of only about 3 to 4 arc minutes, a fraction of 1 degree, tighter than some modern buildings manage with GPS. No compass existed yet, no satellites obviously. In 2000, Egyptologist Kate Spence proposed the builders use the simultaneous transit of 2 stars across the sky, tracked over time, to calibrate true north with the naked eye. It's a compelling idea and it fits some of the evidence neatly. It also still hasn't been fully proven, more than 2 decades later, and other researchers have proposed competing methods of their own. Exactly how they hit that precision remains genuinely unresolved. And here's a strange footnote. The burial chamber at the very heart of this massive tomb is empty. In the 9th century, an Islamic exploration team tunneled into the pyramid's deepest chamber and found a granite sarcophagus waiting in the dark. No mummy, no jewelry, no inscriptions. The lid was already shifted aside as if someone, or something, had been there first. Whether looters beat them to it centuries earlier or whether a body was ever placed inside at all is still not settled today. The largest tomb ever built on the planet, and it may never have actually held anyone. Here's where it gets stranger still. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids team used muon tomography, detecting subatomic particles called muons that constantly rain down from space, which pass through empty space more easily than they pass through solid stone, to essentially X-ray the pyramid from the outside without drilling or touching a single block. The scan revealed a massive void directly above the Grand Gallery that no record, no map, nothing in 4,500 years of study had ever indicated existed. The team doubted their own data at first. A gap that size missed for this long seemed almost too strange to be real, and remeasured with 3 completely different detector types built by 3 separate research groups. All 3 found the same void, in the same place. In 2023, a more precise scan mapped that void as a corridor roughly 9 meters long, 2 meters wide, and 2 meters high, sitting near the pyramid's north face. Researchers threaded an endoscope camera through a tiny gap to actually film inside it. What came back? A narrow passage with a vaulted ceiling, a space that had not been seen by a single human being in 4,500 years. The question of who built this pyramid has largely been answered. The question of what's still hidden inside it hasn't. One of the most heavily studied buildings on the planet, surveyed, scanned, mapped for over a century, and there's still a real chance for someone alive today to be the first person ever to lay eyes on part of it. Somewhere in that workforce, on a 21 cattle a day ration, 3-month rotation, a crew proudly calling themselves Friends of Khufu, was a person who had no idea the stone they carried would still be standing 4,500 years later, still keeping one last secret from everyone who came after. History doesn't disappear, we just haven't finished listening yet. If you want to keep digging into the stories history left buried, subscribe to Witness to Time.